But the main force fighting Israel are Shia Muslims. It's the Houthis of Yemen. Who are the Houthis and what are they fighting for? This is the book. It is Hezbollah in Lebanon. It is the Islamic Republic. They're the ones that are opposing Israel and standing with the Palestinians. And Israel knows that. That's why they're constantly, calling for war against Iran. But there's a lot of money from Qatar, a lot of money from Turkey, and a lot of money, probably from Israel to try and obscure that, right? All these people that they roll out to be the leaders of the Palestine movement, right? What's his name? The guy they tried to deport. I don't even remember his name now. The guy they tried to deport, and that they want the Palestine movement to not acknowledge that Iran is the main source. That's why, we printed thousands of copies of this book. We went to the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, and they escorted us out. We paid to go in, and we were not selling them. We were just leaving them around. We had thousands of copies of these books, and we were just handing them out, and they violently escorted us out. PSL thugs removed us from the convention because they did not want us to read this, right? The Party for Socialism and Liberation and Brian Becker, they are agents of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they put on a convention that was just a place to have a stage for Hassan Piker and, Mamdani and Mahmoud Khalil and all of them to, beat their chest. Oh, we hate Israel. And they would not allow us to distribute this book about who is really opposing Israel, the Houthis, because they don't want people to know that. So if you want to help Iran, then you go to Palestine rallies, make clear that the Houthis and the Iranians and Hezbollah and the Shia Muslims, the axis of resistance, those are the people that are the Palestinians' friends. Because you saw the polls, a majority of Americans now support the Palestinians. But they need to know that if you support the Palestinians, you should love Iran. You should love the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? Because they are the best friends of the Palestinians. It's the Shia Muslims, the axis of resistance. They are the ones, the people inspired by Imam Ali and Imam Hussein. They are the ones that are fighting for the Palestinians. And Brian Becker and the Party for Socialism and Liberation and the Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party and all the woke grifters, they are trying to cover that up. They're trying to cover that up. Now, you asked me to touch on the history of Iran. Right? Iran, it was a monarchy. You had the Shah of Iran, right? And the Shah was in power. And the Shah of Iran, during the Second World War, the British were his main enemy. And so, like many people in the colonized world, the Shah of Iran, because the British were his enemy and he wasn't a communist, the Shah of Iran and the Iranian monarchy was sympathetic to the Axis powers because of the fact that the Shah of Iran, he was fighting the British, and the British had done horrendous things to try and colonize and oppress the Persian people. And so there were many Persians that were sympathetic to the Axis powers because the British was their oppressor. And this is something, they in Palestine too, right? The Zionists always bring up, the Palestinian cleric, the Grand Mufti, right? And how there was a Muslim leader among the Palestinians who, was sympathetic to the Nazis. Why? Because Britain was colonized by the British, right? It was the British Mandate of Palestine, and the British seized Palestine and were bringing in settlers to kill them, right? And so they were fighting the British. It's not, Gandhi also made a lot of pro-Hitler statements, and that's not good. It's not correct, but it's not because they just hate Jews. It's because they're fighting the British. Like, come on, people. So during World War II, because the Shah of Iran was against the British and was aligned with the Axis powers, during World War II, the Soviet Union and Britain jointly invaded Iran. And after World War II, Iran had a democracy. They had like a democratic government. And they elected Mohammad Mossadegh. And Mohammad Mossadegh was a kind of a socialist. He wasn't a communist, but he nationalized the oil. And he wanted to have a good relationship with both the Soviet Union and with America. And so in 1953, the CIA overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, and they put the Shah, Reza Shah, the son of the Shah who'd been overthrown during World War II. They put him on the throne as the military dictator, the Shah of Iran. And the Shah of Iran was the US-backed dictator, and he had a secret police agency called Savak. And Savak were trained by the CIA, and they tortured people. They were some of the most brutal people. That they tortured people and killed people. It was a brutal, brutal dictatorship. And people in Iran lived in very extreme poverty. It was very bad. And Savak, the secret police, were really nasty. But then in 1963, the Kennedy administration was very worried that there would be a communist revolution in Iran. And so the Kennedy administration pressured the Shah of Iran to have what he called the White Revolution. And that was a land redistribution program, and they built a railroad, and they built some airports. And so the Shah pivoted in this kind of like liberal way because they wanted to prevent a communist revolution, because a lot of Iranians were oppressed and suffering, and a lot of the Iranians in the countryside and all of that. And there was a real danger of there being a communist revolution. So, in the 60s, Iran pivoted in kind of a liberal direction. But there was always a very, 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 fanatical religious Shia Muslim majority. I mean, the Iranians are Shia Muslims. Shia Islam is the religion of the country. And there was, a very, very fanatical religious minority. And when the Shah launched his liberal reforms, Khomeini, who was a Shia Muslim cleric who was very popular, he opposed those reforms because he was a conservative. He was a very, very religious conservative Muslim, and he opposed the reforms. So he fled the country and he went to France, and he lived in France. And Khomeini was in France, but there were a lot of people in the military. They would smuggle audio recordings, reel-to-reel audio recordings of Khomeini's sermons. And they would blast them over the radio. And there was a whole network of people in Iran who followed Khomeini, who was this very conservative Muslim cleric, right? So what happened? Well, obviously, 1968, you had the Tet Offensive, and, the USA starts losing the Vietnam War, and there's a wave of anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movements that are happening all around the world. Iran is a brutal dictatorship backed up by the United States. The Shah is torturing people. A lot of people in Iran don't like it. A lot of young people, students, are protesting against the Shah. And they're also protesting against the United States. And they're protesting and saying the Shah is a puppet of the United States, and they're being killed. And there's labor unions that go on strike and all of this. And Iran is a country that's in the Middle East, and Israel is a country that is oppressing people. And, and there's a lot of resistance to Israel. You have the 67 war, and Iran is in the Middle East. And so all of this, one thing leads to another, and in 1979, the oil workers of Iran went on strike, and there was an oil workers' strike in Iran, and it was brutally repressed, and people were killed, and there was anger in the country, and so the Shah of Iran declared a national holiday, thinking that would calm the country down. And what happened is all the people, because they didn't have to go to work, it was a national holiday, they went out and protested anyway. And people put on burial gowns because they expected to die. And they went out into the streets in big numbers saying they wanted the Shah to step down, death to the Shah, overthrow the Shah. And Ramsey Clark, who I used to work with, the former U.S. Attorney General, he went over there and he was in the streets with the Iranian people. And the Shah was forced to step down. And Khomeini, the cleric, who had fled, Khomeini, he was in exile, but over the course of the 1960s, he had changed, right? And his message originally had just been regular conservative Shia Islam. But he over the course of the 60s and 70s, he absorbed the anti-colonial movement, and he mixed Shia Islam with the anti-colonial movement. And Shia Islam has within it the traditions of standing with the oppressed. The imams were killed, right? They were martyred. Imam Ali was killed. Imam Hussein was killed. And so Shia Islam has a real emphasis on standing with the oppressed and dying for the oppressed and standing up for justice. Imam Ali said that nowhere has he ever seen great wealth without great violations of rights all around it. And so Khomeini's message shifted from simply being traditional conservative, clerical stuff. It became a revolutionary anti-colonial interpretation of Shia Islam. And he came back to Iran and he said, I'm Imam Khomeini. And that he came back, and the Iranian people, the new government, the military, all the officers of the military came over to him, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was declared in the process of, the revolution that came out of the oil workers' strike and all of that. The Islamic Republic of Iran was declared, and that's where the Islamic Republic came from. It came from Khomeini, who came back from exile, and with his anti-colonial interpretation, he called America the Great Satan, Shaitani Bezorg, and he said neither east nor west, and he said we want to wage a war of poverty against wealth, and they built a mass movement of Shia Muslims that were opposed to imperialism, Western imperialism, but also opposed to communism. And so Khomeini took power, and then Iraq was very nervous because Iraq the Iraqis are Arabs, but the majority of Iraqis are also Shia Muslims. And Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, and Saddam Hussein was an Arab nationalist. It was for a secular government. And there were a lot of Shia Muslims, fanatical Shia Muslims in Iraq, who were, inspired by the Islamic Revolution of Iran. And so Saddam Hussein was very nervous that Iran would try to spread the Shia Muslim uprising into Iraq. And so, the Arabs and the Persians have hated each other for a long time. And the USA was giving Saddam Hussein weapons and guns. And the USA basically told him to do it. Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. And so you had the Iraq-Iran war, which was an awful war in which at least 1 million people died. It was a horrendous war that went on for a decade. But during that war, Khomeini, he called for what he called a construction jihad, which was kind of like the 5-year plans, where he mobilized the people and they built what they called the Basij, the mobilized oppressed, a network of councils that exist all throughout Iran to defend the revolution, the Basij councils. And they waged their construction jihad, and they built power plants, they built hospitals, and they built, telecommunications, and gave telephone access to everyone in the country. And it was while they were being invaded by Iran, or by Iraq, they built up their economy. It's kind of amazing what they carried out. And during the beginning of the war, the USA was supporting Saddam Hussein. And then halfway through the war, the USA switched sides. And that's Iran-Contra. That Oliver North and Ronald Reagan, Hezbollah had taken some Americans as hostages. And so they started arms for hostages, where the USA was giving guns and weapons to Iran in exchange for Hezbollah releasing hostages. And basically, because Iraq was aligned with the Soviet Union and was a Marxist country, Iran, the USA kind of, switched sides and started supporting Iran. But they never really supported Iran. And, and then we know that, George Herbert Walker Bush, he famously shot down an Iranian civilian airplane, right? What year was that? It was a commercial airline was shot down in July of 1988. And George Herbert Walker Bush refused to apologize. Iranian Flight 655, right? The U.S. Navy shot down and killed a whole bunch of Iranian civilians who were just on a plane, and refused to apologize. And George Herbert Walker Bush gave no apology for doing it. No apology. Refused to ever say they were sorry. Unbelievable. And so the USA never really supported Iran, but they were playing games with Iran-Contra and all of that. So in the 90s, Iran, was pivoting closer to the United States because Iraq was their enemy. But after 9/11, Bush gave the Axis of Evil speech. And even though Iran had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks, Osama bin Laden was a Sunni Muslim, was a Wahhabi from Saudi Arabia. Iran was named as part of the Axis of Evil. And, the election of Ahmadinejad to the leadership of Iran was a very big turning point. Ahmadinejad many people see Ahmadinejad. He was like a Bolivarian in Iran. He was from a political party called the Alliance of Builders, right? Ahmadinejad, the Alliance of Builders, it was called. And he took power and he really emphasized opposition to capitalism. And a lot of Iranian communists who had been in exile were able to come home because of Ahmadinejad. Very, very interesting. And Ahmadinejad pivoted Iran into a much stronger anti-imperialist position because the USA had called them, the axis of evil. And instead they said, we're not the axis of evil, we're the axis of resistance, right? Not the axis of evil, the axis of resistance. And then Hezbollah, Iran's ally, kicked Israel's ass. And Iran has been very solidly anti-imperialist. Hugo Chavez of Venezuela visited Iran and loved Ahmadinejad. And Iran and Venezuela are closer than ever. Iran has sent all kinds of food to Venezuela. And Iran and Venezuela are very close partners now. There's Iranian supermarkets in downtown Caracas. And Iran and Venezuela are very close now because both countries have been subjected to horrendous sanctions by the United States. And Iran tried to make a nuclear deal with the United States, and they got stabbed in the back. And the nuclear deal, not only did the USA not fulfill its end of the bargain and murder Qasem Soleimani, the USA put more sanctions on Iran. And so Iran fully complied. Everyone agrees that Iran completely complied with the nuclear deal, but they got nothing for it. They got stabbed in the back. And so now Iran is very solidly in the anti-imperialist camp. And Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Republic, says that America is the great Satan, but they don't mean the American people. They mean the American system. I will never forget the day that I was in an auditorium in Tehran, right? When I was in Iran, I was the only American in an auditorium of 20,000 people who started chanting "Death to America," and tears rolled down my face. It was an experience I will never forget. I was in the auditorium with the supreme leader of Iran, and I saw his face. I was about 200 feet away from the leader of the Islamic Revolution. I have been where no American has been. I was the only American there. I got the pat down of my life. When I was at the gate to go in, they saw my American passport. They jumped. And they gave me the pat down that you wouldn't believe. They went through my wallet and they were making sure that every credit card I had was not a blade and checking it. And they patted me down, up and down, and looked in my pants and looked in my shirt. And they wanted to make sure I wasn't a security risk. And I went into that auditorium and I was there with teenagers in military uniforms and poor people and working people. And when the supreme leader of Iran came out, when he walked out, he could only move one of his arms. One of his arms is disabled because he was bombed. And when he came out and he put his arm up, all this auditorium of 20,000 people started sobbing and crying. And the men started extending their hands to him and saying, the blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader. The blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader. Right. And extending their hands to the supreme leader and pledging loyalty to the revolution and just crying just because he was there. Because if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have running water in their houses. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have telephone communications. This is a man who fought for them against Wall Street and against the international bankers and built the Islamic revolutionary movement, Khamenei, the supreme leader. And they were, and I saw it with my own eyes. I was in the room and I saw it. And he spoke for about an hour. And I had a translator in my ear. And I was standing in the back with a bunch of Chinese diplomats and African diplomats wearing suits and ties. They gave us chairs. Most of the people were just sitting on the floor. And I was in the room. And for an hour, the supreme leader of Iran spoke to us. For an hour, he spoke. And he said that there are two deviations of Islam. The first deviation is westernized Islam. And westernized Islam that adopts the principles of capitalism, that adopts the Western system. This is a distortion. He was talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. And he said there's a second distortion of Islam, and it's called Wahhabism. And it's ISIS and Al-Qaeda and their terrorism, Daesh, this disgusting terrorism that says you can murder other Muslims and the Takfirism and all that. That's also a distortion. He said, but true Islam is a revolutionary ideology, but it's not a Marxist ideology. He said, it's not like the French Revolution. It's not like the communist revolutions. It is a revolution that seeks to create justice and create God's will upon this earth. He spoke and he said that he would allow the negotiations with the United States to go on. He said, but Iran and America would never become allies. And then he said to the audience, he said, there's a controversy here in Iran. Some people say that we should not call America the Great Satan. And he said, we do call America the Great Satan. He said the crimes of ISIS and the crimes of the federal police of America, they are just the same. And he talked about Waco and the Branch Davidians. And he talked about how, I'm sorry, I get emotional when I talk about these things. He talked about what they did at Waco and how they bombed the compound at Waco and they killed all these people in Texas and Oklahoma. And he talked about how we don't hate the American people because they are ruled by evil. And when we talk about the Great Satan, we are talking about a system, a system that oppresses people all over the world. He said, we oppose the crimes of ISIS and we oppose the crimes of Daesh. They are just the same. And when he said that, the audience, burst out and they began punching their fists like this. And saying death to America, death to America. And I started sobbing. I was the only American in the room and I started sobbing. Yeah, and I had looked into the face of the Islamic revolution, of this anti-colonial revolution that had taken place in Iran. And I was there in the room with the people. It was an experience I will never forget. And it changed me. And when I came back to the United States, I was not a communist anymore. I was an innovationist. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't understand it. But something in my body changed, right? Something within me. I understood how serious this was. I understood. I had a level of understanding. I had rediscovered my Christian faith on the ship. I had reconnected with God. And then I was in the room. I was in the room with the leader of the Islamic revolution. And I was sitting in an auditorium full of thousands of people in a country that America has been at war with. And it is something that you can't understand. And it changed me. And I am a different person. I am a different person because of what I experienced both on the ship, risking my life trying to deliver medical aid to Yemen, and also because of what I saw in the auditorium in Iran. And I am thankful that God wants to use me to do something. I don't know. My life has taken so many bizarre, strange turns, and a lot of strange things have happened. But I know that I am an anti-imperialist. I am an anti-imperialist to the end. I love my country. I love America. I love my people. And I am opposed to Wall Street. I am opposed to the Zionists and the international bankers and what they are doing to this world. And I have something special to do in this world. And I am here to connect with all the people that are willing to build a movement to actually change this world, to actually oppose imperialism. We have some special, important work to do. We are right here in the center of this international system. And our people, our American people, are struggling, and neighborhoods are being destroyed, and our country is rotting from within. And now is the time to build a movement of the American people to reclaim what America stands for, to say that we will not let Satan, the great Satan, define what it means to be an American. We will rescue our country from international bankers and from imperialism. We will save America from the American empire. We will save America from Wall Street and London. We have something really, really special to do. And I have been there and I have touched it. And so you asked me a question, Tavis. You asked me what I can tell you about the history of Iran. I gave you a history of Iran, and I'm telling you what Iran means to me. Right. And, there's a reason that I'm on every, the FBI have been after me, and that there's a reason that Israel has published hit pieces on me in Haaretz. And there's a reason that my name has been run through the mud by every socialist and communist group you ever heard of, is that we are doing something really, really special here. Let me just put it that way. Right. You asked me what Iran means to me and how Iran has changed me. And I am telling you, I have looked into the face of the Islamic revolution, and it has changed me, and I have become a different person. And I'm a flawed person. I'm a human being. I make mistakes just like anybody, but we are doing something very, very special here. And what took hold in Iran in 1979, that revolution to create not capitalism, but Islam, a war of poverty against wealth, neither East nor West, that movement that says that, to stand with the oppressed is the most righteous thing that one can do. that is an expression of something very, very important and powerful. And I have looked into it and I have breathed into it. I have actually interviewed President Ibrahim Riazi. I sat down with him at the United Nations. I did an exclusive face-to-face interview with the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ibrahim Riazi. Now, if there's anyone who has anti-imperialist credentials, it's me. All right. I have done anti-imperialism and I understand this stuff and I take it seriously. I do take it seriously. I really do take it seriously. And because I take it seriously, I'm not willing to just go along with, the wretched state of affairs. And when I see, the fact that the Palestine movement goes out of its way to alienate the American people, it frustrates me. It annoys me. When I see that, the left, doesn't have a plan to win over the American people, it frustrates me, right? I take this too seriously to just go along, right? What we are doing, building an anti-imperialist movement in this country, is so much more important than any of us realize. It is so much more important. We are the real patriots. We are the real expression of the aspirations of the American people. We represent the only hope our country has, breaking out of imperialism, building a new America that is aligned with the BRICS countries, that is building that Bering Sea bridge, connecting America to Russia with Alaska. We are the only hope that America has. We are the only hope that America has. We don't want to destroy America. We want to save America. And we are the only hope America has for being saved. I'm telling you that. The imperialist system, it is leading to desolation, depopulation, and death. This system of imperialism, read about the fall of the Roman Empire. That's where America is headed. This is what Rosa Luxemburg said in 1914. She said, "This world war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. At first, this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war, but then when the period of unlimited wars begins, it progresses toward its inevitable consequences. The triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery." That's where America is headed if we don't build an anti-imperialist movement and build a movement for a new America, right? Desolation, depopulation, degeneration, a great cemetery. I don't want America to be a great cemetery. And if you want America to be a great cemetery because that sounds edgy and cool and that's the cool thing to say to show that you're edgy and hipster, fuck you. All right? I love my country enough to say that I'm not going to let us go the way of the Roman Empire. I'm saying that we have entered the era of unlimited wars because this system can't go. It's because of overproduction. It's because of the tendency of the falling rate of profit. They need constant war in order to just keep their system on life support. Their system is barely functioning right now, and they can't stop having wars. They're thinking about having a new war with Venezuela because they need war just to keep their system alive, and their system is already practically dead. It's on life support. This is the future that imperialism is offering America. If you really want to make America great again, if you really want to make America great again, you've got to oppose imperialism. We are the only hope America has. I want to save America, and that means a government of action that fights for working families. That's what it means. It means building a movement that demands a government that fights for the American people and will rebuild America as part of the new BRICS world. Okay? And these are not simple concepts. The problem of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit and imperialism, the monopolistic stage of capitalism, the Atlanticist pathology, all this stuff we talk about, it's not simple, right? It's not simple. We have slogans that we use. We need a government of action to fight for working families. That's a slogan, right? And it understands what we advocate, right? A government of action to fight for working families. I'm an Irish American. Why would I be an Ashkenazi? And why does that matter, right? Why does that matter, right? I'm an Irish American. I'm from Irish Protestants. I talk about this, on these streams all the time. Why are you going there, right? This is this kind of cringe stuff that, right? You're going there, right? Because you want people to, you want people to be thinking about who's a Jew and who's a not Jew, right? And we don't want to be anti-Semitic here. We don't hate anyone on the basis of their race or their religion. We don't, right? We don't, right? And my wife is from Guatemala. My wife isn't a Jew. She's a Roman Catholic. What the fuck are you talking about, right? Why are we being racist here? I am just as opposed to the Israel lobby. I'm widely accused of being anti-Semitic. I don't pull any punches, but anti-Semitism is stupid. It's stupid. Don't be Borat. Come on. Don't be a Borat, right? Don't be a Borat, right? Like, what the hell? We're not preaching hatred for Jews. We are preaching hatred for imperialism. And part of imperialism is Zionism. And Zionism, the spirit of the ghetto, the belief that Jews are so special and so superior, they have to have their own country. And it's a big part of imperialism. It's anti-populism and philosophical irrationalism. And we should understand that. I wrote a whole book about Trotsky and the neocons and how, the spirit of the ghetto, the mindset, that gave birth to Trotsky's, anti-Stalinism, and the mindset that, behind neoconservatism, how there's a trajectory there. But don't be racist. Come on, don't be racist, right? We don't hate people for their ancestry, right? What if I was a Jew, right? It wouldn't matter. Is what I'm saying true or not true, right? We're not preaching racism here. We're just not doing that. We don't hate anybody because of their last name, because of what family they're from. We are here to build a movement to talk about real issues. And we know what Zionism is, and we know what imperialism, globalism is, and that's what we're against. We're not preaching racism. Exactly, Funky. Is this really happening? Are people really this stupid? Right? Is that, they hear me talking against imperialism and Zionism, and they're like, oh, he must be an Ashkenazi. Who cares? Who cares? We oppose racism. We oppose anti-Semitism. Don't be a Borat. Don't be a Borat. Borat is a Zionist propaganda film, and I've got more questions to answer, but I'll just tell you this. The movie Borat, right? Sacha Baron Cohen, who is a Zionist, made this film, right? This propaganda film, basically. It's funny. I mean, it's clever. But basically the film is, it's a demonization of Russians, right? I mean, because it's about a guy from, a former Soviet country, but he's a Muslim. It's a demonization of Muslims and Russians as stupid anti-Semites, of dumb people that are inherently anti-Semitic. And it's this, he dresses up as a Central Asian guy, and he goes around, I hate the Jew, Jew have horns, and he walks around. And it's, first of all, it's a racist lampoon of both former Soviet people and Muslims. But on top of that, it's also, the message of the film is he goes around America pranking Americans and getting Americans to say racist stuff, right? And the message of the film is that deep down, the Americans are just a bunch of Borats. So you have to have an Israel, right? Sure, the Middle Eastern people are bad. Sure, the former Soviet people, the Russian people are bad. But the Americans, deep down, white Americans are just the same as those dirty Arabs and just the same as those dirty Russians. And that's why we need an Israel. It's an attack on the American people. It's a Zionist propaganda film. And it says that Jews are just so magically superior and that all non-Jews are a bunch of Borats. Don't be a Borat. Don't be a Borat, right? Don't be a Borat, right? That's what I'm telling you. Anti-Semitism is socialism for fools, right? It really is. And it is socialism for fools, right? It's not a question of, I've talked a lot about anti-Semitism. Classic anti-Semitism is the resentment of the working class against the middle class, right? It's the stereotypes of Jews are stereotypes of the middle class. And you can see the middle class. You can see the shopkeeper in your neighborhood. You can see the lawyer in your neighborhood, but you don't see the billionaires who actually have the power. And it's weaponizing the resentment of the middle class, of the working class against the middle class. And I've talked about that at length. We are not preaching racism here. We don't hate anybody because of their ethnicity. We don't hate anyone because of their religious background. We are not preaching ethnic or religious bigotry here. And it's like, that's, you heard everything I just said about anti-imperialism and all of that. And that's what you took from this. Is he an Ashkenazi? That's really sad. I hope that you do some really spiritual work, person. I don't want to, I don't want to get over the top, but I just that really, it hurts me spiritually that you heard me talking about my experience as an anti-imperialist and my trip to Iran and all of that, and you took from that, what race is he? I mean, come on. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. Don't be a Borat. Come on. Don't be a Borat. Maybe that's a new CPI slogan. Don't be a Borat. Don't be a Borat. Ay, ay, ay. Ay. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Briggy, for saying what you said. I appreciate that. Briggy is amazing, by the way. We have a member named Briggy from Pennsylvania. She's absolutely awesome. What race is he for real? Yeah, seriously. Right?